Today we're talking about identity in reference to the many titles attributed to Jesus Christ. It's estimated that in the scriptures, between 150 and 200 different titles are applied by the Savior to himself. Several years ago, a former professor of BYU, Susan Easton Black, identified over 100 titles just in the Book of Mormon alone. The many titles of the Savior not only invite us to see him differently, each title also represents a unique facet of the Savior's identity, complete with required beliefs, values, and behaviors. Thus, by viewing the many titles of the Savior through the lens of identity, we can come to understand why he behaves the way he does. I wanted to share 3 examples from the Savior's life to help make the point of how this works. Remember that identity is multifaceted, meaning that we are not just one thing, but we are comprised of many different competing identities, each with their own required beliefs, values, and behaviors. And those competing identities can get triggered when we present ourselves into certain contexts, because identity is also highly contextual, meaning we make choices about which identity will drive our behaviors in a particular context. Recall in the book of Luke, chapter 2, verses 41 to 49, when Jesus and his family traveled to the temple at the time Jesus is turning 12 years of age. The context of the temple prompts Jesus to act in his identity as the law. And we see this same context triggering Jesus to act in connection with his identity as the law when he appears to the Nephites after his resurrection at the temple. It's the setting of the temple that leads him to seek out the teachers and scribes and Pharisees of the day and ask them questions and give them answers. Another example occurs towards the end of Jesus' life when in Gethsemane. The physical location of Gethsemane, outside of the Temple Mount, across the Kidron Valley, on the Mount of Olives, prompts Jesus to act on his identity as our great high priest, as mentioned by Paul in Hebrews 4:14, and as the great last sacrifice, as mentioned by Amulek in Alma 34:10, as required by the law during Passover. If you recall in Numbers chapters 19, verses 2 through 4 and verse 9, the priest, during Passover, was required to leave the Temple Mount with a red heifer. And across the Temple Mount, on the Mount of Olives, he would offer a sacrifice on behalf of all of Israel. The context of Gethsemane prompts Jesus to act similarly. A final example of another title that Jesus fulfills occurs while he's on the cross, when his mother is at the foot with his disciple John. The context of being near his mother is so provocative in understanding who Jesus really is. There was nothing in the law that required him to transfer the care of his mother into another person. But it was his concern for his mother at this time of his greatest suffering that made that a priority. Hence, he transferred Mary's care into his most beloved disciple John's care, evidence of his love and concern for her. This act by Jesus gives us powerful insight into his behavior towards her long before the moment of his death. It teaches us how he would have behaved his entire life when in the presence of his mother. So, we see that when viewing the scriptures, particularly Jesus, through the lens of identity, gives us clues into not only how he behaves, but why he does so, and how the various titles throughout the scriptures prompt him to act and speak in ways consistent with those titles when in various contexts throughout his life. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to click on the subscribe button below and follow us on social media at Power of Godliness.